Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO. Today I got a very fun and very exciting episode for you guys this evening because we are playing the recently released, as of Friday late afternoon, English translation of Princess Crown. This is one of those games that has been in Japanese since its inception, and everyone has always been waiting for a translation. And multiple people have started the project and just not finished it, so up until 2 days ago, this is a game that while I would recommend it to absolutely everyone, actually understanding the story and knowing what was going on in the game was impossible if you didn't speak Japanese. Well, today that's completely different thanks to eadmaster or eadmaster, not sure how it's pronounced. They have released a beta version of a full English translation giving you the entirety of the story in English. And while there are a few formatting issues and it is still a work in progress, you can play Princess Crown today, get 100% of the story in English, and absolutely now enjoy the game even that much more. Before you get far involved though, do me a huge favor, down below hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But this is what the game used to look like up to 72 hours ago. It was just completely in Japanese, and this is the last time I previewed it on the work in progress Sega Saturn MiSTer FPGA core, and even if you couldn't understand a word of what the story was trying to impart, the lush animations and the amazing 32-bit graphics on Sega Saturn just looked so incredible, and the gameplay was so good you wanted to play the game even if you didn't know what was going on in the story. And that is why this has been one of those translations that everyone and their uncle have always wanted when it comes to Sega Saturn English translation projects, and it is here today, and I've thoroughly tested through it. I've talked to some other people that have tested it, and I can tell you right now it plays on my original Sega Saturn on my Saroo cartridge, as well as other ODEs for Saturn. It plays via every single Saturn emulation option, including Mednafen and others, and here as I'm playing it on MiSTer FPGA and the work in progress Sega Saturn core, it works there as well, and that is just absolutely something to celebrate. Sega in general and Saturn specifically have been having a great 2024. There's been so many new cores, so many new fan projects, and if this is the last thing that happens for Sega Saturn in the year, I would be absolutely fine with that because this is just a coveted translation, and the good thing is all of the translated text makes perfect contextual sense, not changing any of the intent of the story, just bringing it over to English. But I do want you guys to be aware, even though the translation is done as far as the story elements are concerned, this is still a work in progress, and some of the text is going to have a little bit of formatting issues, and every once in a while the text is going to draw over itself. You will 100% be able to read everything on screen. You don't have any issues reading it. It just is not a perfectly buttoned up patch at this point in time, but the developer of this said that it was a beta, so we really shouldn't expect perfection. But just being able to understand what in the hell is going on in Princess Crown is amazing, because I basically always just made up the story in my head as to what was happening, and that is because I cannot read Japanese in any way, shape, or form, as most of the viewers of this channel can't. And this game would go on to be so foundational in so many other amazing games for the developer, stuff that is still some of the best 2D ever made. And that again, it's just such a fun time, because honestly the story in this game, at least the parts that I've gotten now playing the English translation, are absolutely intriguing. A lot of the motivations of your character make more sense now, and it really just does hook you more into the story. You'll see here that some fairies have stole some children off to the woods, and that kind of starts off the entirety of the game. We knew before that something happened and a fairy visited because we would see the fairy in the actual gameplay, but we had no idea, at least I didn't personally, as to what was going on. But now you'll see here with the English text, the fairy is going to arrive and say that they didn't kidnap the children, something else is going on in the woods, and that kind of sets us off on our actual adventure. So now we actually have motivation as to what we're doing in Princess Crown, not just playing it because the gameplay is so good and the graphics are so incredible. And I would definitely say, at least to me personally, Princess Crown has the best graphics in the 2D realm of any Sega Saturn game ever made. But you tell me down below in the comments what's your favorite 2D Saturn game. There's so many to pick from. Guardian Heroes would be up there for me as well, but honestly Princess Crown just looks incredible. It's a 10 out of 10 any day of the week. But obviously the story now is going to get a higher score than it did before for me, because I can absolutely understand what's going on. And even though there are some improvements to be made as far as how the text draws, if it never improved any further than this, I would be totally happy, because now the entirety of the story is here. And according to the GitHub notes, I will leave a link below, all of the story elements are intact. You will need to build this with some patches off some of the images from the game, or you can probably find pre-built versions elsewhere on the internet, but I can't point you to those here. But the other best part about Princess Crown is it has some of the best music on Saturn in my opinion. The fantasy vibes just 100% work with the gameplay and the graphics. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds. I'll come back and talk more about the patch and why this game is just so damn good. But enjoy! Just such a fun soundtrack, and as a complete aside from the translation effort, that is the most current MiSTer FPGA Sega Saturn core, and there's definitely been some improvements, so I expect to see a new video on that in a little bit. But again, this game is just so absolutely incredible, and is the foundation for some of the best 2D beat-em-up hack-and-slash games I've ever played. Stuff like Muramasa, stuff like Odin Sphere, Demon's Crown, they are just such incredible games, and they all start here in Princess Crown. It was developed by Atlas, but the makers would go on to found Vanillaware, giving us still some of the best 2D assets I've ever seen in video games. But it's just such a fun project to have something like this. There's so many incredible games on the Sega Saturn that are locked behind Japanese language, and of course before you leave that comment, just go learn Japanese. Not everyone has the time or the skill set to learn a different language, and I never really appreciate that comment. Translation patches are super important, and when somebody takes the time to actually make one, it should be celebrated, which is exactly what I'm doing here. And it's not like this game is light on text either. There is an absolute metric crap ton of story going on here, so the idea that you could actually translate all of this over, it is an absolutely massive project, and it's one that's definitely a labor of love. And again, it just seems like there's such a resurgence of Sega Saturn in 2024. So many people that comment on the video, so many people I talk to are discovering the Sega Saturn for the first time ever. I'm not sure if that's because of the MiSTer FPGA core videos, if it's just because there's an FPGA core in general, or other fan projects. Yet it seems like suddenly in like the last 12 to 18 months, people are realizing that Sega Saturn is every bit as good as anything PlayStation 1 did, and because so many people didn't think it was worth it, they're really discovering the library now. Now additionally on the translation, it's not just going to be for story elements. Obviously navigating the shops are going to be a lot easier than they were before. Again, there's still some issues with the overall formatting of the text, but nothing you're not going to be able to navigate your way through. You'll just see here, sometimes the text is going to wrap around that box and end up at the start. But just like a word that has all the letters mixed up except the first letter and the last letter, you're going to be able to decipher what is going on here. And again, I'm sure this will get updated. It is just a first pass at the overall project, and what a great first pass it is. And the best part is, even with English, it's still going to be the same game that if you played before, you fell in love with all the amazing 2D combat, all of the great sprites, all of the great characters. That is all still obviously coming over intact. Now you can just understand what's going on. And if for some reason you've never heard of Princess Crown before or never played it, I can't recommend it enough, and obviously now it's even easier to recommend because it has an English story. You will see here that when the text runs a little bit long, it is going to overwrite itself, and that is something that can and will be improved in the future. But again, it's not like you're missing any text. It's just looking how you would expect it to look when you have 2D overlays. You'll see here again, if you hold down the button to speed it up, or even if you let it run at the normal speed, sometimes that text is just going to overlap itself to give you that new bit of information. But that's to be understood and expected in a translation project like this. A lot of times it's not the hardest thing in the world to translate the text, it just takes time, but to actually get the fonts in, get the formatting in, and make sure all the text draws correctly versus the original Japanese kanji can be quite the heavy lift, and that's why you see in a few instances here it isn't quite perfect, but I'm sure it'll get better. But the number one thing about this is you can now understand your motivations in the game. You know why you set off on your adventure, you know all the characters' names, you know what they're telling you, and you don't have to use a walkthrough to be able to beat the game, because before, if you could not read Japanese, there's pretty much no way you could kind of poke through this and hope for the best to uncover everything without being able to understand some of the hints and clues you're given in the game. So now you can throw that walkthrough away, and you can basically play this completely from start to finish in English, and that is incredible. This is just one of those games. I've been waiting for an English translation patch for this thing for over a decade, since I first played it maybe in like 2011, 2012, so probably more like 12, 13 years. And it is here today. It might not be finalized, but it is incredible. And like I said earlier in the video, you can play it on MiSTer FPGA, you can play it on real Sega Saturn hardware, and you can play it on all emulators. But if you do use Mednafen, it seems like the graphical user interface has an issue. Launch it with a Q file in the command line and it'll run. If you use the GUI, it has a tendency to not work. But short of that, whatever you do, go play Princess Crown in English, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.